The Justice Department announced yesterday that it will not pursue civil rights charges against anyone in the NYPD for the choking death of Eric Garner, the unarmed black man who was confronted by police in Staten Island, I believe it's 5 years ago, in connection with allegations that he was selling loose cigarettes, without having paid appropriate tax on them. He famously fell to the ground under the police onslaught, was not violent in his resistance, had police arms around his neck in what some said was a banned chokehold, said the words, "I can't breathe," multiple times. It was all captured on a now very famous video. His words became an iconic sort of mantra of protest, symbolic of the greater issues in terms of police brutality, Black Lives Matter, civil rights more broadly. And what I wanted to address today in terms of what people can do about it is was sort of born out of the fact that a lot of attention is being paid to reporting that there was a conflict here. The Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department apparently wanted to proceed with charges. However, the Eastern District of New York, which has geographical jurisdiction as opposed to the issue-based jurisdiction of the Civil Rights Division, the Eastern Division said, no, we don't want to. And yesterday, the Eastern Division prosecutor, Donahue, I believe his name is, he gave his reasons why. And it turned out, it's been reported anyway, that Attorney General Bill Barr cast the deciding vote here and said, we're going to go with the Eastern District over the Civil Rights Division. And so a lot of the attention is being focused on Bill Barr, his background, his motives. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he racist? Is he not racist? All those things. And those are valid, understandable areas of concern, right? We should care about whether the Attorney General of the United States of America, the top law officer in the country, is sufficiently invested in the project of protecting vigorously the civil rights of everyone, but certainly black people in encounters with law enforcement. So that's a valid area of engagement and interest. What it doesn't give us a lot of room to do, however, is do something about it. Right? With the current president, no matter what finding you're able to come up with about Bill Barr, no matter what conclusion you draw, there's not a lot you can do about it, short of some sort of impeachment proceeding or something in Congress. I don't even know what the mechanism is for removal. So I wanted to think a little bit about what can we do? And to me, it's important to address what's the stated reasoning behind not prosecuting. And the stated reasoning was pretty clear. There are 4 criteria for prosecution that have to be met under the civil rights, under the sort of basket of applicable civil rights statutes here. And the one that Donahue said was operative here was that they did not feel that they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt willful use of excessive force. Willful, meaning it had to be knowing, conscious choice to use force that the officer knew to be unjustified. And so I was curious where this criteria came from that they had to meet in the court of law. And based on the quick amount of research I was able to do, it looks like, this is from a legal ruling that I found, that the willful requirement, the requirement for a willful violation of civil rights, came from the Criminal Code of 1909. It says in the Supreme Court ruling that discusses this act that I'm reading about, it says that the drafters of that law added the word willfully specifically in order to make the section, quote, less severe. And it succeeded. It's less severe. This is a standard, willful, that's not applied to other criminal activities, or at least most other criminal activities. You just have to prove, did you do it? Not, did you mean to break the law? Did you have conscious intent to do wrong? That's a very high standard. As the prosecutor said, you might disagree with him, about what his decision was, but he's right when he says that's a very high standard. And if you think he's a good guy just doing his job, or if you think he's a racist hiding behind this section of the law, in either way, the remedy is the same. Either deprive him of that shield, or if he's a good guy, remove that requirement. And the way you do that is to change the law. So if you're outraged by the outcome from the federal government of its disposition on the Eric Garner case, if that outrages you, there's something very concrete and clear you can do about it, which is to eliminate the willful requirement from the law. And that's pretty easy to do. You just pass a law that says that's not the case anymore. You do not have to prove that in order to prove a violation by police of the civil rights of an unarmed, non-violent black man accused of a petty crime. So if people are genuinely outraged, maybe there can be less attention spent on proving that Bill Barr or Donahue are bad and racist, and more energy actually put into let's change the law. If they're bad people and they're hiding behind it, let's get rid of it. And that, in theory, provides justice in the future and maybe even saves lives. So that was what I had to say about what people can do about the Eric Garner ruling if they're outraged. Because my guess is that the media don't look very closely at the rationales that are given or the legal basis for them. So, and that's partially our fault, right? If we don't pay attention to the coverage that does do that, then we don't get coverage that does do that. So I'm going to turn away for a moment just to see what you guys have had to say. If you have any questions about this, my thoughts on this, my analysis, and again, I should not again, for the first time, I should be clear, I'm not a scholar of the Eric Garner case. I don't know the ins and outs. I don't know the legal route that it's taken. I do know that there is still some deliberation going on at the city level as to whether to fire at least the primary officer. And it's possible that there are also civil remedies. The family maybe now can sue in federal court for violation of civil rights on a civil level. So there may still be remedies, but let me see what you guys have to say and see if I can offer anything useful in response. They argued the cop didn't, sorry, this is Mr. Elder. It says, they argued the cop didn't put him in a chokehold when the cop is seen on video doing it. Yeah, that's true, at least to my understanding of the case. But I also think that part of the issue is whether the chokehold fits the quote-unquote definition of a chokehold. We might have a layperson's definition of a chokehold, which is an arm around the neck, but it also might be choking. There might be other more fine-tuned definitions here. But again, this sort of caviling over the ninth part of a hair, to use the Shakespeare phrase, if we take away the requirements for prosecution or conviction that currently exist in the law, specifically to make the law less severe, then we don't have to worry so much about was the chokehold banned or not. We don't have to worry about that. A cop killed an unarmed, non-violent black man who was not posing a threat to anyone. Coroner ruled it a homicide. If that were not a police officer, anyone else would have been prosecuted for that and probably convicted. The fact that it's a police officer should make it easier, not harder, should make it easier to convict that person, precisely because the standard for their behavior should be higher than that of a layperson, both because they have the training, but also because they are operating with the force of institutional governance behind them, the city and the entire government. They are the spear tip of the entire government, which means they must be held to a higher standard than random civilian non-governmental entities. So basically, black people are screwed since the whole government is racist, says Deborah. I think broadly that's a fair statement, but I also think it's an unnecessarily nihilistic one, because I think it's important to acknowledge that progress has been made, and progress again can be made again. As I said in the commentary, I think progress rarely happens unless we know beforehand what it looks like, right? What are we asking for? And in this case, I think the ask is relatively simple legislatively. Get rid of the willful definition. Any legal standard that requires proving knowledge and intentionality in here, that's a very, very difficult legal bar to meet. And there's no justification for applying that standard when we're talking about the actions of governmental agents, in this case, city police officers. Mr. Elder says, and cops are getting bad. Just last night I was stopped for just walking. Yeah, I mean, it's not good. And I think, I do think it's an open question whether it's getting worse or better. The statistics certainly don't show it getting better. And I think, but I do think there's a couple things here. It's tough to prove that cops generally are more racist these days than they were in the past. And I think there's probably good reason to question that assumption. More troubling, I think, or more salient, I suspect, is the fact that we have more cops and we have a much more militarized worldview of how how situations should be handled, right? I used to actually be a beat reporter in Brooklyn, and I had access every week to the precincts. I don't remember, they were called 61s was the name of the form, and it was like incident reports basically. Cops would write up, this is what happened. And one of the phrases I came to learn in there was EDP, which stood at the time for emotionally disturbed person. And the number of incidents where police were responding and it turned out to be an EDP was really alarmingly high. And my point here is that it was police responding, and this was before 9/11. It was police responding when we're talking about someone who is emotionally disturbed by definition. That's the phrase they're using. They don't need police. You very seldom actually need police. The arrival of police on a scene is by nature an escalating incident, an escalating event. When you're talking about an emotionally disturbed person, and even when you're talking about most crimes, what you want is de-escalation. And since 9/11, we've been in this mindset where safety, the possibility, even just the possibility that someone might get hurt or killed, is considered so morally offensive that any action to prevent it is justified. And that's not how we were before 9/11. Before 9/11, we were a little bit more mature as a society, as a culture. We understood bad things happen in the world. And the project of creating America was an explicit decision to embrace the risks of liberty. And one of those risks is not doing everything you can to secure safety. It was a specific choice of give me liberty or give me death. And we chose liberty. And what we've done since 9/11 is we've decided liberty is a luxury, and anything that poses a risk has to be considered an absolutely intolerable. And so if you're just walking and some cop with a see something, say something mentality sees you just walking and their antenna go up and they don't realize why, they act on it because we've got this zero tolerance. Now, their antenna might go up for racist reasons. They might be concluding that you're a risk because you're a person of color. I don't know whether you are or not. I believe it was Mr. Elder who made the comment. But prior to 9/11, there was, I think, a little bit more reticence to act just on the basis of antenna, right? There were reasonable standards, just cause and probability. I'm blanking on the phrase now. Probable cause. You had a much higher standard. Now we're in a situation where we have the government telling people, if something seems suspicious to you, call a cop. It's mind-boggling. And so, of course, we get, if you're not told to examine your reasons for thinking something feels suspicious, then if there's even a tiny bit of racism in you, not even conscious, but latent implicit racism in you, you're going to be calling cops on people who have done nothing wrong and by any rational basis have given you no cause whatsoever to think they're suspicious. So we live in this hyper fear, hyper militarized, hyper police, hyper safety environment. And so it's all the more important that our civil rights laws not have a high standard for holding government accountable, but have a relatively low standard for holding government accountable. Because now we're in this world where we've explicitly told government, do everything you can to keep us safe. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And if we are going to say do everything you can, then we need to redefine everything you can much more narrowly. Mr. Alter says, 3 cops stopped me last night and demanded I identify myself, and of course I didn't. I wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking. They even tried to manufacture saying I was being suspicious. Yeah, well, you probably were. I'm guessing you were being suspicious by having the nerve to exist while being a person of color. I'm curious to know what happened. I hope you're okay. I'm sorry you went through that. The other thing I should say here is that I also think it's a mistake to treat cops as sort of unreconstructed racists in toto, right? Some of them certainly are, and they're sort of, they I think are one end of a spectrum, and it's important that we deal with the entire spectrum. And police, some police do go through training to identify and weed out implicit racism, but when police are told, the same messages we're all told about, if anything seems suspicious, go, go, go. And they're the spear tip for everything, even when it's EDP, right? I was thinking the other day, it's crazy that we don't have something like a non-police response force, right? Just like people you can call when you have a problem, right? Why should every problem, let's say you get a flat tire out on the road in the middle of nowhere, you need help, let's say you don't have you can't afford AAA or whatever it might be. You don't have access to someone or something. Why would a cop be the person you call? And again, just the fact that police are our primary first response for an entire basket of social ills or temporary problems that have nothing to do with crime, that reflects, I think, the sort of warped lens through which we view daily life. Deborah Stuckey says, I cannot blame 9/11 on the way these cops are. I feel like I can. I'm not saying it's entirely the fault of our response to 9/11, but in my career as a journalist, both before and since 9/11, I've certainly seen enough changes, not just in police, but just the broader society, to, it's my opinion, that we've become a much more fear-based society. And I think that infects cops, and we've also become much less tolerant of risk. And that also infects and puts pressure on cops. I think the danger of saying that cops are racist and evil is not that it's unfair, but that it doesn't give us a lot. It narrows our arsenal for solving things, for fixing things. And I think that certainly some of them are, but it's also a spectrum. I'm sort of old enough to remember when the left used to say that everyone's racist, right? It was sort of an assumption that people on the left had, white people on the left had, I'm not saying universally, but this was a pretty common mode of thought, was that we're all racist. And the project of moving forward and getting better was to figure out not where hate might be inside us necessarily, though obviously if that's there, you want that gone, but to figure out implicit bias and to identify systemic bias and do some self-work there. And I think that mindset, rather than which sort of says it's a universal sin, it's an original sin, and we're all guilty of it, and we all need help getting clear of it, or at least getting better. And I think that mindset is more likely to win over cooperation as opposed to resistance from cops and others in law enforcement or other institutions broadly, in terms of pursuing the project of making things better. And that's not to say that racism shouldn't be called out, or racist actions or racist language. It all should. But in terms of our broader systemic approach to policing and civil rights, it seems to me important to recognize that however large the cohort of dyed-in-the-wool, KKK, card-carrying, full of hate, N-word using cops, however big that basket is, it's not all cops. And all cops need help being better. And so I think if we lump everyone into that basket of sort of absolute irredeemable evil, then we miss out on the opportunities to help the other cops get better. And in theory, that costs lives. If they're not better, innocent people could die, right? So these aren't absolutes. I'm probably saying things that I might disagree with 5 minutes later, but I'm trying to think this out. And I think just generally that when we sort of that was the other thing that the left used to be, I think, pretty good at in this country, was rejecting the use of evil as an explanatory mechanism, right? That was sort of a revolution in terms of crime and law enforcement, was to stop seeing criminals as evil people and to start addressing social forces and social structures that created and incentivized criminal behavior. And I think if that makes sense to do for criminals, it's worth at least trying for cops and prosecutors and other people as well, to not assume, to reject evil as an explanatory mechanism, because what do you do about evil, right? And to really grapple with, just as we did on the criminal justice side, on the criminal side, grapple with the social and cultural forces that incentivized and led to criminal activity. Mr. Alter says, after 30 minutes of arguing, they gave up, and I'm a quarter Native American, Caucasian. I look white. Well, so that's, I'm glad they gave up. I'm sorry I had to go through 30 minutes of that kind of horse manure, but, and it's hard to say how it would have turned out if you did not look white, but I'm glad it worked out. Deborah Stuckey says, the cops are not anything but KKK with a badge. I certainly think that's true, but I also know some black cops who are very concerned about civil rights issues and police brutality, and I certainly don't think they're KKK with a badge. So, and they don't think that every white cop is bad. And I've talked to white cops. If you look at some of the reporting that I've done recently, I've spoken to current cops, white cops, black cops from in and around South Bend. I was looking at Pete Buttigieg's administration as mayor there, and there were, excuse me, there were white people in the law enforcement community who were concerned about racism. So I think it's correct to say that some are KKK with a badge, but if you say that they all are, then you yourself are putting them all on the same side against you. So I would say peel off the ones who aren't actually KKK with a badge and isolate the ones who are, and deny them the allies, right? Divide and conquer, right? If there are cops out there, and I believe there are, and I've talked to ones who I think are, split them off. Don't when you lump them all together, they're all together. Don't lump them all together. Lisa says, don't ignore cop culture. They always stand together. It's not about race. Well, again, I would reject, or at least be suspicious of, phrases like they always stand together. If you go back and look at my South Bend reporting, some of them spoke to me being critical of other cops. So they don't always stand together. And when you say they always stand together, then what you're saying to those who are willing to be whistleblowers, I don't see you, you're invisible to me. So instead of saying they always stand together, I would say, let's do the work to identify the ones who don't, and let's celebrate them, and let's make them visible. And that sends a signal to other potential whistleblowers that you'll be seen, you'll be taken care of, you'll be seen, you'll be protected. Because the biggest aspect of cop culture I've found that prevents whistleblowers is not so much like the honor of it, but the idea that they're not protected if they come forward. That internally their departments, their higher ups won't listen to them, that they'll be punished. I had one cop tell me on the record with his name that he came forward with claims of racism and was punished for it. So when we say that they all stand together, cops like that who want to come forward, they feel as though no one's even willing to see them when they do come forward. So I'm generally, not always, but generally suspicious of absolutist terms. So, and I certainly would push back on that here. Mr. Elder says, but I'm a poor person. One look at my clothes, you could tell I'm poor, not raggedy or holy, just old clothes. Yeah, I mean, socioeconomics on a broad scale plays into all of this stuff. It's race, it's class, it's gender. There's religious issues. I'm obviously a white dude. I'm a straight white dude, so I'm right. The word's privilege. I'm privileged not to have to worry about a lot of those things, at least not have to worry about them affecting me personally. But a lot of them come into play, right? You could have been straight white male, but excuse me, wore something that identified you religiously, right, in a way that made you suspect. Maybe it was a Satanism or paganism or Wiccan T-shirt or something. You know, there are all of these signifiers that can, trigger this kind of othering, which tends not to put you on a good footing with police. Lisa says, my brother-in-law is a black cop and he always backs up his fellow officers, even if they do racist things, but I see your point. Well, thank you, Lisa. That's gracious of you to say, and I appreciate it. And I would be curious why your brother always backs up his fellow officers, even if they do racist things. My guess is it's not because he thinks they're my brothers, right or wrong, but because from a coldly cost-benefit analysis point of view, my guess would be there's no reason for him to come forward. There's no reward for him to back them up. If anything, not to back them up. If anything, reporting them, my guess would be an extremely risky thing for him to do. So it's kind of infantile for us as a culture to expect people to come forward when we tolerate and create systems that punish them for doing so. That's crazy making. And my guess would be that your brother-in-law's stance on this arises less from some sort of noble-minded, although obviously wrong-minded, code of honor than it does from the simple cost-benefit analysis of his fellow officers would reject and ostracize him, and his higher-ups wouldn't protect him. That would be my guess. Mr. Elder says, not all cops are bad. There are good ones, but every day there is getting less and less good ones. I have ran into some good cops. Yeah, I have too. So Lisa says, I agree with the point that there are good cops out there. I'm sorry, I'm just despondent. I'm sorry you're despondent too. And there are cycles to how we process these things. When the highest law officer in the country says, I'm not going to prosecute the death of an unarmed, non-violent black man, that's cause for despondence. But that was one of the reasons I wanted to do my commentary today the way I did, which is, as we move through despondence, we move to things like anger and desire to change. It doesn't have to be anger. It can be hope. But right, we have lots of different emotional places roads that lead us to a place of, I want to change things. This Eric Garner means enough to me that I want to make sure that in his name, things change so that there are fewer of him in the future. And if we really want to do something about it, we tell our members of Congress, this is why, and don't assume they know this, right? My guess is a majority of members of Congress, if you ask them what's the legal rationale for not prosecuting, my guess is most of them would not be able to name the four, let alone the one that was operative in this case. So educate them as well. And as always, you know, anyone will tell you who's saying go to your member of Congress, be polite, be civil, operate in good faith, assume good faith on their part. Once you don't, not because they deserve it, it's not about this like, oh, they don't deserve my good faith. I won't get into what I think of that kind of thinking right now. But the point isn't whether they deserve it or not. The point is if you don't give it to them, they won't listen to you. So if you really want to make change, as opposed to just feeling good and self-righteous about having the right position, then operate as if they are operating in good faith. That's my advice. Kalita says, Michael, what's his name, got a reprimand for not shooting a suspect. I'm not familiar with that case, or at least it's not, yeah, Kalita points out, the ring doesn't tell you're straight since you know gay marriage and stuff. Yeah, as soon as I did that, I was like, wait, no. So you caught me. You're right. You're correct. Don Juan, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly or if that's the real name, says, I hope the cop who killed him gets a serious vigilante justice. He needs to visit the devil sooner than later. So that would be bad. That's not how we do things. And certainly visiting the devil is not something that I, as an atheist, believe in. And just generally as a human being, I tend to lean more towards redemption and mercy and forgiveness rather than some sort of notion of retributive justice, right? I think there can be justice without it being retribution or being punitive. But I think if we are to hope something, it's to have hopes for Eric Garner's family and those who cared about him, and for doing something to reduce the number of Eric Garners in the future. How can one reach out to you, John, besides YouTube? KG says, directly through the TYT website. So you can certainly DM me on Twitter. I'm at JT Larsen, JTLARSEN on Twitter. We've also got a tip line for TYT Investigates that I check not as often as I should, but I do check it. And that's the Young Turks at protonmail.com. And just so you know, Proton Mail is a secure email system. But if you email me from your Gmail account or whatever, then it's not secure. You have to set up a Proton Mail account if you want it to be secure, going from one Proton Mail account to another. I'm assuming this is not for a big, hot national security whistleblower tip. So in that case, you know, just DM me on Twitter. That's fine too. Cody says, Jonathan, yes, great to try and give a positive vision as to where to go from here. Thanks for that. Well, thank you guys for being here for it. And I do want to reiterate that I'm by no means a scholar or an expert on this case. I haven't followed it. I haven't done any reporting on it. Not out of lack of interest. I'm one reporter, and we have to make choices all the time. And it's not, this case is important, therefore I will report on it. We have to make practical calculations about what does it make sense for me as an employee of the Young Turks to dedicate attention to. And when the facts of a case are pretty much broadly out there, then there's not often a reason for me to investigate. My job is to find out new things. In the case of the Eric Garner, lots of people are looking at it. So my point is, I'm not an expert on it. So if there's information that I've screwed up or context that you guys think is important for people to understand, I really hope you'll share that and put it in the comments. And certainly if I've gotten something wrong, I'll try to correct it in a way that's equivalent to the nature and the size of me getting it wrong. Yeah, Don says, I'm just so mad with how often these things happen. These cops always seem to get away with it. It's sickening. It does seem that way, especially in the high-profile cases, and especially lately. I don't know whether it's good news or not, or whether it helps or not, but it doesn't always happen. Sometimes they are convicted. I know I saw one earlier this year. It just wasn't a high-profile one. It came and went, got very brief coverage. And of course, it does matter that it's in the high-profile ones, we're not seeing justice being pursued to its fullest. The fact that it's high-profile, the fact that it's happening in low-profile cases matters, of course, to the specifics of that case, but in the larger sense doesn't matter because it's not sending the broader signal to the broader law enforcement community, the broader social environment in which we live, that this is not okay and this will be punished and we must change, and we need convictions to send that message. Lisa ends with, all people deserve human kindness. That's probably why we're all upset by the situation. Yeah, I certainly think that's a part of it, and I certainly endorse the idea that all people deserve human kindness. And I think there's been a lot of attention in regard to the detention of undocumented immigrants, with how they've been demonized and monsterized and dehumanized beforehand, and how the language we use to talk about people enables and facilitates wrongful treatment of them after the fact. And for that reason, I think it's important that the left resist that impulse when talking about racist cops or the president or anyone. I think dehumanizing language is a danger that applies no matter who the language is directed at. So my hope for this discourse and any discourse generally is that we can condemn behavior, we can condemn language without stripping the people doing it of their humanity. So that's my closing Mr. Rogers thought for the day, and I want to thank you guys as always for joining me and sharing your thoughts and all that. And if you don't already, I hope you'll subscribe to our YouTube channel where you're watching us right now, watching me right now. And we also put up this content and other stuff on our Facebook page. Again, it's TYT Investigates, so I hope you'll like and follow us on Facebook. And as always, share our content if you think it's worthwhile with people you think would get something out of it. And I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.